Now for our What in the World segment. This week in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood announced it would apply to become a political party. That is, of course, the Islamic group, long banned, that many fear, if allowed to come to power, would create an Islamic republic in Egypt like the one in Iran. Ever since all eyes turned to Egypt, there have been many questions, allegations, rumors, information, misinformation about the group. So what's fact and what's fiction? Joining me now, perhaps America's top expert on the Muslim Brotherhood. Tarek Masoud, a professor at Harvard University, has been studying the group for years and is writing a book about them. Welcome.
Thank you.
Who are these people? You've met hundreds of them. What do they look like? Give us a snapshot, a kind of profile.
They actually look sort of like me. When I was following them in the 2005 elections, I'd be wearing my blazer, I'd be clean-shaven, and people would often think that I was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood because that's sort of how they appear. They're generally not what we think Islamists are. We generally think that Islamists are poor people, downtrodden, who are turning to the comforting certainties of religion and religious zealotry. The Muslim Brothers are quite different. They generally tend to be pretty well-educated doctors, engineers, pharmacists, veterinarians. These are not the poor of Egypt. They're kind of upwardly mobile folks.
People think of them, though, as a kind of reactionary, a retrograde organization. What is their relationship to the modern world? Do they like it? Do they want to turn Egypt backwards?
Well, their relation to the modern world is complex. I mean, certainly they do want to turn Egypt backwards, but not backwards in the way that the Taliban want to turn Egypt backwards. They're not the kinds of people who are rejecting Western science and learning. On the contrary, if you look, for example, at the web presences of various political organizations, nobody uses the internet more intensively or more effectively than the Muslim Brotherhood. So these are people who have a desire to engage with the best thinking that's coming out of the West because they believe there's nothing contradictory between that and Islam.
One of the things you've surely heard is that they want a caliphate. In other words, a kind of Islamic empire that would be like the 7th, 8th century caliphates of Islam. Do you hear that much?
Absolutely. So, yes, they do want to return to the caliphate, but their vision for the caliphate is a little bit different, and it seems to have evolved with time. You often read, you know, about a kind of United States of Islam. That's the kind of thing they're looking for, a kind of European Union for Muslim countries, the head of which would be called a caliph.
What about human rights? Are Egyptians comfortable with the idea of a political party that would really disenfranchise women in a very big way?
I think Egyptians would not be comfortable with a political party that disenfranchises women. I think some members of the Muslim Brothers would be. If you look at the debates that they have, for example, about the role of women, they still not have come on board with the idea that a woman could, for example, take Egypt's presidency. And as a result of them taking those views, lots of Muslim Brothers have actually started to split away from the movement because they believe that that view is incompatible with what Egyptians want.
What is their commitment to democracy? You hear a lot of people say this would be, they would come to power democratically, but then subvert it because ultimately what they want is not democracy, but an Islamic state.
So that is a very important question. It requires us, of course, to peer into their hearts to know whether when they say they demand democracy and call for democracy, they really mean it. My sense is that we've had a lot of experience with the Muslim Brothers over time, demanding democracy, behaving in ways that are democratic. And so I think generally their commitment to democracy is pretty sincere. I also think more important than that, nobody is on board for a return to a kind of autocratic system. So even if the Muslim Brothers wanted that, they couldn't achieve it.
What is the relationship between the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda?
Al-Qaeda views the Muslim Brotherhood as basically having sold out, as having abandoned the cause of jihad, and by choosing to work within democracy and to try to compete in elections, they feel that the Muslim Brothers are sellouts merely upholding an irreligious, un-Islamic order. Yes, the Muslim Brotherhood slogan has all kinds of blood-curdling lines in it about, you know, dying for the sake of God is our highest aspiration. But when those lines are uttered by sort of roly-poly physicians, they become far less frightening.
So is it fair to say, Tarek, what you're describing is a group that is socially and politically pretty reactionary on issues like women's rights, has some views that many Westerners would regard as extremely reactionary, socially conservative to say the least, but that you don't detect any strong currents that are deeply anti-democratic or that support violence and jihad? Is that a fair summary?
I think absolutely. If we make this distinction between different kinds of extremism, there's an extremism of ends where your goals are perhaps extreme to erect a society that many of us may not agree with, and there's an extremism of means, the kinds of tools you're willing to use to get to those ends. And, you know, the more extreme you are in that dimension, the more violent you'll be. I think with the Muslim Brothers, there's clearly an extremism of ends. Their views are not views that we would share here in the liberal West, but I think they've come very cleanly on the side of nonviolence. And so in terms of their means, I don't think they're very extreme. And you can work with them. And
is it fair to say, I mean, you're a scholar of the movement, and you've tried to understand them, but if you had to vote in an Egyptian election, you would not vote for the Muslim Brotherhood?
If I had to vote in the Egyptian election, I would be voting, for a liberal, secular party, perhaps the Wafd party. But no, I would not be voting for the Muslim Brothers. But I would allow them to participate in politics, because I also think the only way that you're going to get them to evolve and change is by competing against them.
Tarek Masoud, pleasure.